Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you to this Q&A with what is already one of the best movies of the year. At this time, please join me in welcoming the actor who plays David Foster Wallace in this movie. I'm sure you're a fan of him from such things as I Love You, Man and Forgetting Sarah Marshall, but I doubt even his biggest fans were prepared for his completely transformative performance in this movie. Please welcome Jason Segel.
Hello. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on a movie that's so good, I'm surprised it came out in the summer.
Oh, thanks, yeah. Me too.
This is an audience of fellow actors, so I always
Cool.
like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG
Awesome.
card?
Oh, man. Well, my story is a real anomaly. I got seen in a high school play when I was 17 years old. I grew up here in LA. I did a play called The Zoo Story by Edward Albee. Yeah. And it's just some real LA stuff. There was a woman who was thinking of sending her kid to the school, and she turned out to be president of casting at Paramount. So that's my advice.
It's just that easy.
Yeah. No, I got very lucky, and I think about that a lot.
I'm mostly shocked to hear there was a high school doing Zoo Story.
Oh, well, it wasn't like
heavy.
an official school production. I was a really weird kid, and I was an athlete a long time ago, and I would pass the theater department on the way to art history class, and I would pick out a play and read it because I kind of thought it was something I wanted to do. And I read The Zoo Story, and there was like a 20-minute monologue in it right in the middle, and I thought I'd like to try to put this on. So I asked him if I could borrow the theater for a night, and I found another kid who was an actor, and we did it on our own pretty much.
Wow. And
It
who
was
was that
fun.
other kid?
Oh, his name was Ryan Harrison. Yeah.
I was hoping it would be like, and that boy was Seth Rogen.
Nelson Mandela.
They let him out of prison just to do the show.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, how did the end of the tour first come to you? I know this is based on a book with a very wordy title. That I
Yeah.
always...
Although, of course, you end up becoming yourself is the name of the book. Yeah.
Were you familiar with that book and with David Foster Wallace?
I was not familiar with the book. I was familiar with David Foster Wallace as a young writer. You're sort of introduced to him. His short form is just so funny. I don't know if you guys have read any of his stuff, but A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again is a good place to start. But I hadn't tackled Infinite Jest. It's just this massive tome. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it's huge. So what happened, my experience was the script, I was about to get on an airplane, and the script arrived, and I had sort of put out, well, I guess it's important to set up some context of where I was in my life. We're all actors here, so it's sort of a different discussion. I was 33, 34 years old. I had been working really hard since I was 18. I had written a lot of what I had done, because it was the only way I knew how to make it. I did a show called Freaks and Geeks when I was young, and assumed that right after that you just go on to the next groundbreaking show. That's, I had like the naivety of youth. And I entered into like a 3 or 4 year out of work period immediately after Freaks and Geeks. And I had chosen not to go to college to do the show, basically. And there was this like moment of, oh my God, I've ruined my life. And so then Judd Apatow, who produced that show, took me aside and said, you need to start writing. It's the only way you're going to make it, which is the best advice I can give anybody, because you don't need permission to write. You can write alone in your house. So I had made a bunch of comedies when I was young, and I ended up on a great TV show that went for a decade. But by the time I came out on the other end of the show at 34 and had been on this hamster wheel of work, I realized that I had stopped thinking about making sure that what I was doing was reflective of where I was as a person at that time. So like Forgetting Sarah Marshall was very reflective of who I was at 24 years old. It's like very honest depiction, sadly, of what I was like. And you're sort of encouraged in this business to just kind of continue doing your first success. Like, oh, you're good at that, just keep doing that. Well, 10 years later, I kept doing that and found that I was now like disinterested in what I was doing. I wasn't connected to it. I think audiences were becoming less connected to it. And I was like, I need to take a minute and think about what it is I actually like, where I am now, what I want to express as an actor. I was always embarrassed to think of what I do as an art. I was a high school athlete. It's a great documentary called Beauty is Embarrassing. And I think I felt a little bit of that way. Like I felt embarrassed to say, declare like I'm an artist. It was easier to just be funny or something, you know? But so anyway, this script came along right before I got on a plane, and there was a particular line in it where David Foster Wallace says, I have to face the reality that now I'm 34 years old, alone in a room with a piece of paper. And as somebody who wrote a lot of their own material, it was just exactly how I felt at the time. Like I've done so much, and I now feel basically like I have to start from scratch. And by the time I landed, I felt like I need to do this movie, and it's so cruel they sent it to me because nobody will ever cast me in this part. Like that's impossible. And then my agent told me, no, he's really interested in you, James. I think you guys should hop on the phone. And this is like the beauty of a very special director. He saw something in me I didn't even see in myself necessarily, but certainly like it wasn't like the community was clamoring for me to do something like this, you know. And like when the David Foster Wallace script comes across the desk, no one is like, get Segel on the phone, stat.
Now they will be.
Yeah, maybe, you know. But that isn't it funny? That's how it works, you know. Like so. Anyway, he said that he really wanted to do a movie that didn't deify David Foster Wallace. That was a big pitfall. As you go into this thing with like gravitas, and everything feels really weighty. He said it's really important to remember that David Foster Wallace is funny. That David Foster Wallace was also like a dude. That was sort of one of his strengths, is that he offered a surrogate experience as a writer, where he basically said, for the next 1,000 pages, I'm you. And that's the kind of acting I have always admired also, the Jimmy Stewarts and the Tom Hanks, the Kermit the Frogs, who are like, I'm you know, I'm the everyman. And then he said, ever since Freaks and Geeks, when I watch you act, even when you're doing comedy, I see something very sad behind your eyes.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like a very intimate thing to say to somebody. And then we got off the phone, and like it was never explicitly said that he wanted me to do the part during the conversation. So then I was left with this feeling like was that a date or not a date? Or are we just friends? Like what's happening? And we had a few more talks, and we decided to do it together.
Was there a moment when he formally offered you the job?
No, it was sort of more like you want to do this thing together? When you say formal, I picture him like arriving in a suit with like a
contract
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was much more like a discussion. James is my age, and actually has a similar background. He played football at Yale and ended up getting into film, and we just related on a lot of levels. So it was kind of like there was something kind of like oddly intimate about it, is the only way I can describe it.
So you never actually read for him or did any sort of an audition?
No, the only time that I ever read for him before we started shooting, I was already doing the part. But I think at some point everyone, well, he and I, neither of us were admitting to the fact that like we hoped I could do it.
I mean, did you know you could do it?
I sure hope so, but no. I mean, the big thing that you're battling in this whole process in terms of fear is you say to yourself privately, or like at dinner parties or to your best friends, like, I should be doing this kind of material. If they only sent me this. And then you get the opportunity and you're faced with the possibility that you're wrong. You know, it's like really scary. For me, that was the biggest thing, is to walk through that fear. Like, the fall flat on your face factor is huge. Anyways, so at one point I was working really hard, and we would check in every once in a while, and I could tell we were both nervous. And so then at one point I just said, what's your address? And he said, because he was asking me questions like, how's it going with the dialogue coach? And how's it going with the this and that? And so I finally just drove to his house, and we did a scene together, and it went great. It was the first time I spoke kind of out loud as David Foster Wallace, so it was important for me also.
And that was before you started shooting?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. No, that was about a month
If he was
before we
still
started
worried,
shooting.
yeah.
No. Well, we were both, I think everybody was nervous on the first day because Jesse and I had 0 rehearsal because of the nature of our schedules. And so the first time that Jesse saw me act as David Foster Wallace, the first time I saw Jesse act as David Lipsky is the scene where he arrives at my house. The first 2 scenes we shot were him arriving, the exterior shot with those dogs, and then we went immediately from that scene into the scene where he walks in and we have our first discussion and I'm in the kitchen and we discuss sort of the parameters of the interview. And you can feel us in that scene sniffing each other out, Jesse and I, and it ends up working really well. But nobody knew what was going to happen. Like no one knew if this was going to work.
Well, you and Jesse have such great chemistry. I think I assumed that you had met before or you were even friends, but that wasn't the case?
No, we met once in the lead up to the movie. We had like a get to know you mixer. Me and Jesse and James and the producers, and we were sitting there and like we had never met literally. And Jesse is like the best guy in the world. He's like a really good friend of mine now as a result of this experience. But he is a little like how you see him to some extent, like when you first meet him. And so we're sitting there kind of quietly, and then somebody asked me, how'd you get started writing? And I have this thing that I say, like, to deflect. I just say, oh, well, nobody was knocking down my door to play Captain America. And it's like designed to get a little chuckle. And Jesse's like sitting there quietly, and I said that. And then he just said, under his breath, but loud enough for me to hear, he said, no, but you could probably play the captain of a weaker country.
To play David Foster Wallace, I mean, have you played a real-life character before?
No, I think that's the first real person I played, yeah.
And you really jumped into it with a person to play.
Yeah, I went in hard. Yeah, and it's... You know, the thing about being the kind of writer that David Foster Wallace is that as a result, the readers feel very personally about him because he has been you for that 1,000 pages or for that short essay or whatever. And there's another thing that reading Infinite Jest does. My experience was, I read it, I started a little book club with some friends. So we would read 100 pages a week on our own and then get together on Sundays and talk about it. Well, Infinite Jest, like... has a lot of discussion about feelings of loneliness and feelings of dissatisfaction that you as a human being, as a man, spend a lot of time not discussing, even with yourself. And those Sundays turned into 4 grown men talking about feelings of loneliness, like over burritos. And I mean, truly. And so I think you walk away from that experience of reading Infinite Jest feeling like he's your friend, he's intimate to you, and you hold that book. And so I wanted to make sure that I was respectful of that he means so much to people, but I also wanted to make sure I played him like a real man who was complicated and tried really hard to be nice, sometimes did not achieve that. And then I also just wanted to make sure that it worked for people who didn't know who David Foster Wallace was, that there is a more human thing that you have to try to get at. To me, what the movie is about is this terrifying, very universal moment where things go exactly the way that you hope they'll go, and you realize you still feel the same. That's the moment to me. I remember for me, it was I danced down Hollywood Boulevard with the Muppets, and it was my birthday that day, and it was just like, it was like a cartoonish example of the best moment of your life. And I remember going home that night thinking like, well, what now? You know? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a very human moment. You know, sometimes the halo lasts longer, sometimes shorter, but that to me was what the movie is about, is what's going to make you feel okay, because it doesn't seem to be achievement.
Where did you find people to join a book club to read Infinite
Oh
Jest
man, it was
in
at a
today's day and
bookstore.
age?
It was I went into this bookstore in my. I rented a house in a small town to read Infinite Jest because I like didn't want to be distracted. And so I went to the little bookstore and I set Infinite Jest down, and there was like a Ghost World kind of girl behind the counter, and she like rolled her eyes at me and she said, "Infinite Jest. Every guy I've ever dated has an unread copy on his bookshelf." And so do I. Anyway, so there was a guy behind the counter, and I said, he said, "Oh, Infinite Jest, first time?" And I said, "Yeah." This is all true, like honestly. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "How long should I give myself to read it?" And he says, "Oh man, hey, Dylan!" And like another guy comes out, like another book guy, and he's like, "This guy's gonna read Infinite Jest. Wants to know how long to do it." I'm like, "Oh man!" And then it was like a moment out of Parker Lewis Can't Lose. One of the guys went, "Book club," and then the other guy went, "Book club." They were super psyched. They came to the premiere, and they were just
Really?
yeah. Those guys those guys helped me more than anything else in the process, honestly, because I was just immersed. I was immersed with those guys. Those were the guys talking about loneliness over burritos. Yeah.
What did Dylan think of the movie?
I think they all, honestly, like the simplest way I can put it, I think they were all really proud of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was it a difficult shoot? I know just the weather alone was a nightmare, but I mean, from an emotional standpoint, was it hard?
It was pretty exciting, actually. It was hard in that it was grueling. It was a $3.5 million movie, so it was, all of that is on the screen. We shot 15, 16-hour days. We were all staying together in this like residence inn, hotel, motel thing, and Jesse and I would drive to work together in the morning, rehearse our lines for the day because there's so much dialogue and you really can't paraphrase it. You have to know it perfectly because it's coming out of the mouths of geniuses. And man, and then we would just act all day with/against each other, because it's a little like doing that movie, especially with Jesse, is a little like playing this friendly tennis match where you need the other person to maintain the volley. But the whole time you're thinking like, when do I level the winning blow? So it's a really interesting dynamic. You need each other, but you also want to beat them in the scene because it's what's happening. It's like in another movie that might not be the case, but in this, it is two guys having an intellectual face-off, discussion by discussion. And he and I didn't need to be on the same page about what each scene was about, because it wasn't necessarily for each of those characters. David Foster Wallace, I think part of what the movie is about is David Lipsky seemed to think, the character of Lipsky seemed to think that conversations were about something different than David Foster Wallace thought they were about.
Right. And Jesse had the advantage of actually meeting David Lipsky.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not an advantage.
Yeah,
Make it harder.
it has its own set of complications. Yeah, Lipsky was a great resource. I had access to all of the actual recordings from the 4 days, which was really special.
And were you able to meet with people who knew David?
Yeah, I did. I met with a few people who knew David, and then I had to kind of let all that go. And well, here's what I think the premise of Infinite Jest is to some extent. It's that we're all the same, that we all feel very similarly underneath these things, and there is a real thing culturally where we're told that pleasure, entertainment, and achievement, some combination of those are going to make us feel good. Basically, like work hard all day, come home, crack open a beer, and watch Real Housewives. And like that is you're told like that you'll feel good if you do that. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people of a very specific generation don't. And so I really tried to focus on that idea and that feeling and build a character around that, around somebody having a moment realizing, like, wait a minute, I might have been sold some lies here, and I have the opportunity to talk to my younger self. Because that's how I saw Jesse. He's like that little bit younger than me. And Lipsky as a character is like, he's just on the other side of the tunnel, looking up, saying like, man, it must be great to be you. Right? It feels great to be you. Can't wait to be there. And David Foster Wallace looking back saying like, be careful, kid. Like, man, you're trying so hard to get there. I've just found out there's no there. Like, this tunnel goes on forever. And also, like, you're going to regret being such a dick. You know?
That's great advice, actually.
Yeah.
And have you gotten feedback from the people who knew David Foster Wallace or any of his relatives?
Well, I've gotten feedback from people who knew him who seem very pleased.
I heard, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're not allowed to say, but I heard that someone in his family saw it and really loved it.
Oh, well, I think, like, I really respect the privacy of people who saw it, but a lot of people have said things to me that really made me feel like, well, I really did everything that I could.
What do you think he would think of the movie?
You know, I think that a while ago I learned to not try to guess what other people might think, because when I try to, they're always thinking about me.
What ended up being the hardest part of making the movie? Either something from an emotional standpoint or maybe just logistics. I know it was a short shooting schedule.
Yeah.
It's not easy to say.
It was the only movie I've ever worked on where I've heard the expression, we're running out of film. That happened on the airplane scene. The scene where he first says, did that happen at the recovery house? And we have that, it's the first really tense moment, the first like standoff in the movie. And we did it a few times, and then James came up and he was like, do you guys feel good? Which, like, I knew something was off. And I was like, yeah, why, what's going on? He's like, whoa, we can do a couple more. I'm like, what's going on, man? He's like, we're running out of film. And, but there's something great about that.
Yeah.
You're, like, reminded of why you got into this in the first place. Like, me and my friends used to, scramble to make short films. That's how we learned how to do all this stuff.
Can you say what the shooting schedule was?
I think it was 25 days, something like that. And there were a few days before I arrived with Jesse in New York, and then I arrived, and it was, I had 4 weeks of shooting. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Was it an easy character to shake at the end of it all, or does he still, haunt you in some ways?
Haunt isn't the right word. It really, the whole experience really changed my perspective on what I want to do. It was the first time that when the movie ended and they said that's a wrap, I felt like, well, I've done everything that I possibly can. And you're normally, like, in my prior experience, you're connected then to how it does at the box office or reviews or these things, and the fact that things went well is wonderful. But it's, it's like that line David Foster Wallace says, honestly, that was the best acting I could do in February of 2014. That's the truth. Like, there's nothing more I could have done. So after that, all I had to face was reality. Like, there's some, maybe it turns out I'm not as good as I hoped I was. And then you deal with that.
Well, you're being a little modest when you said things went well. I mean, it was a huge, I know from people who were there when it premiered at Sundance.
Yeah.
The response was rapturous and kind of shocked, to be honest. And it was
I had the real surprise factor going for me. They're like, Segel? But yeah, it was really nice.
But should people be shocked? I mean, everyone knows that comedy is the hardest thing to do. And you've been able to pull that off. Why wouldn't you be able to do drama? I've seen dramatic actors who can't be funny.
Well, yeah, the answer to the first part of your question is, like, at this point, I'm 35 years old. I don't really expect anyone else in the world to spend any time thinking about the nuances of what a stranger is capable of. Do you know what I mean? Like, it takes some out-of-the-box thinking to think, like, oh, the guy from How I Met Your Mother, I bet you he also is capable of, like, it's just not how people spend their time.
Well, somebody did think that, James Ponsoldt.
James Ponsoldt did.
Yes.
Well, that's what honestly, like, I think that's what makes somebody a great filmmaker. You look at all of his movies, and he has gotten things out of actors that you wouldn't necessarily know that they were capable of unless you were watching as a director with that eye when you're watching performances, and seeing this thing and saying it's that guy. Like Mary Elizabeth Winstead in Smashed. I don't know if any of you saw it. It's a performance that like just slaughters me. It rocks my world.
Yeah, he's really batting 1,000 with his movies.
Yeah.
He's never made a movie that wasn't fantastic.
Yeah.
I do have some questions from the audience.
Cool.
Catherine, who has very nice handwriting,
Hey, Catherine.
wants to know, how do you decide what projects you'll take on?
Well, it was interesting. In my 20s, I was writing a lot of the stuff, and so I would do that. And then there was a big. I was really lucky to be part of a group, and we would do movies together, and that was really fun. And then I think in my early 30s, I started to feel like that's not a good enough reason to choose your parts. And now I made like a list of things I actually like. You know, this sounds like an assignment you would give a kid, but I did it to myself. Like, what is it that I actually like? And I made this list. And then I started like writing down movies that I liked when I would see them. And I think the criteria for me now is like, would I watch it? When I go home at the end of the day at 10 p.m., what is it that I put on? And it's like Frank. I don't know if you guys saw Frank or Only Lovers Left Alive. It's those kind of things. I look back and I think like it's no coincidence that Sarah Marshall ends with like a lavish Dracula puppet musical. It's masquerading as a romantic comedy, but it's really weird. And that's the kind of stuff that I really like.
It is weird. I remember just being shocked by full frontal male nudity and
Yeah.
thinking, you don't see that in a regular rom-com.
No, both of those things were met with like basically the attitude of like, it's your movie, honestly, and proposing them. The full frontal nudity especially, and then the Dracula musical, like people thought that I was just like torpedoing the movie. Yeah.
And we have a question from Keeley Field. Wants to know, what's the best advice you've ever received as an actor?
Well, it was when Judd, I think, told me that to start writing my own material. Because even if nothing ever gets made, it really helped me deal with this feeling that I was out of work. You know, like you're in this state of waiting for permission, feeling like you're making no progress. That's how I felt. Like you're just waiting. And everything felt at times like, oh, I'm just auditioning constantly and nothing is happening. And then when I would write, I would felt a little bit like I was taking my power back. I actually honestly would put on a suit to write in my own apartment.
Really?
Yeah, like as a mental gymnastics, like this, I'm going to work. Because for me, it was really scary being unemployed. I'm still scarred by it to some extent, like this feeling like this feeling like it can go away at any minute, because that's what happened to me in my early 20s. I still try to shake that feeling.
And after making a movie like this, I mean, I have to imagine it changes you as an artist and to some extent as a person. Are you going to be really picky about what you do next? Which is not to imply you weren't before, but...
Well, no, I think I certainly was less deliberate. I think what I'd like to do is choose things... those movies like Frank and Only Lovers Left Alive and Grand Budapest Hotel, like there are these little music boxes, that you pull off the shelf and they exist and they stand on their own. None of those mesh into anything else. I like that idea.
So what are you working on now or have coming out
Right
next?
now I'm writing. I'm just writing. I write these kids' books called Nightmares. Yeah, I do. I really enjoy it. I really like kids' stuff. And so I'm going on a book tour, and I'm also writing one of the new Lego movies, and then trying to pick what movie I'll shoot next year.
To act in or
Yeah, to act in, yeah. I don't really want to direct right now.
Really?
No.
Right now?
Yeah, but right now I don't think I'd necessarily be good at it. Like you work with somebody like James Ponsoldt and you realize like, oh, it's an actual talent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I feel like if I directed it would be out of pride to say that I directed, but I don't, like I watch somebody who's actually good at it. And I feel like it would be kind of arrogant. This is how I feel right now. Who knows how I'll feel, but unless I feel like I'm the only person who can do it, I don't know why I would do it when I know better directors who are like my buddies, you know? Can I tell the cutest book story?
Yes, please.
Sorry, this just happened and it's like really cute. So I do these Q&As for little kids, and they get to ask questions about like nightmares and stuff and Muppets and everything. So this girl got shoved into the aisle to ask a question, but she's too young to have autonomous thinking. She was like 5 years old. And the microphone came to her, and her mom whispered in her ear the question. She's like, and the daughter's like, Frozen. And there's this like really weird pause. No one knows what's happening. And the mom was like kind of like stage mommy, is like, and the daughter goes, what's your favorite movie?
Did you say Frozen?
Yeah, totally. It was the cutest thing I've ever seen. Sorry. I just thought you can take that with you and think about it.
What did you answer?
My favorite movie is Being There.
Oh, wow. People take that as a personal victory.
Well, I remember when I saw Being There when I was, like coming of age as an actor, seeing Peter Sellers and thinking, oh, you can do anything. Like that's the guy from Pink Panther. And now he's doing that. I remember just thinking, oh, you don't have to define yourself in any way. Yeah.
Which you have absolutely proven.
Oh, thanks.
I want to again congratulate you on a fantastic movie.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you guys.
Thank you guys. I hope it was entertaining. Yeah.